Hi, we'd like to welcome you all to a webinar on a newly launched program designed to make software available to small and medium-sized transit agencies at greatly reduced prices, designed to help them better plan and to deliver service to their communities. I'm Terry Bills, and I'm the Transportation Industry Manager here at Esri, and I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. Today I'm joined by Justin Kreisinga, an account executive on our public transit team, and Jay Hagan, a solution engineer, also on our public transit team. Let me start by acknowledging that these are difficult times for public transit agencies. Even before the outbreak of coronavirus, the mobility patterns in our cities and counties were rapidly changing, and transit utilization was declining in most US cities. So unfortunately, the current crisis has significantly impacted most public transit agencies, with many agencies reducing their service, and with current estimates that most transit agencies are operating at 10% or less capacity. So the coronavirus is really taking place on top of what was already something of a crisis in public transit. And we don't really expect transit agencies to quickly recover when the virus fades. So it's really to help transit agencies look at how they can reinvent and redesign their services to emerge from the current crisis stronger and able to provide better service. That we are launching the small and mid-sized transit enterprise agreement program. So before we begin, let me point out that we are recording this webinar, and while everyone will be on mute, there will be time for question and answers at the end of the webinar. And so you just type your question into the question box, and we'll try to answer as many as time allows. And in addition, both slides from today's webinar as well as this webinar itself will be made available within the next few days for those that were not able to see it live. And we will give you a link to a landing page, a website, to give you a variety of other resources as well. So let me start by stating that solving our mobility issues and our mobility problems is probably the central challenge for most cities in the US. Prior to the coronavirus crisis, most cities were struggling with rapidly increasing levels of congestion, which was constraining mobility and generally degrading the overall quality of life in our cities, a condition which was ultimately not sustainable for the future. So I think it becomes a given that solving our mobility issues is one of the central challenges defining a smart city. And I often say that you really can't be a smart city if you're not solving your mobility issues. At the same time, I think most transportation professionals would agree that public transit must provide the backbone and the core elements of any city's transportation solution. That said, with our urban mobility patterns changing before the crisis, and they'll likely change even more after the crisis, these are going to introduce new challenges for cities. And in addition, ridership is becoming more diverse. They have different expectations, especially among the younger generations. I think what that means is that transit agencies are going to have to think differently about what types of services they provide and how they think about facilitating greater mobility in our cities. And ultimately, I think that will require tapping into a wide range of new data sources to help understand those changing patterns. I think the ability to do analysis in new and creative ways, as public transit agencies will need to understand the travel patterns of diverse segments of the population and how transit services can target those different segments with different requirements. So this analysis will necessarily be different from the way that we've approached transit service analysis in the past. And ultimately, I think it will require the analytical capabilities that are contained in GIS. And additionally, I think we're going to have to do a better job of understanding and better coordinating across different modes. Unfortunately, it's still the case that in most cities, we often have different agencies responsible for different elements of our transportation systems. We need to think and coordinate more holistically. And in this regard, some cities have recently been creating the position of a mobility coordinator, designed to focus on those interagency coordination and planning. But ultimately, we're really talking about the livability and the sustainability of our cities. And while for some time the larger public transit agencies have long taken advantage of Esri's GIS technology to help them design world-class systems, smaller agencies have often been left out. And it's really for that reason that we are launching the Small and Medium Transit Agency Enterprise Agreement Program. It's really designed to deliver software and data and training and a series of pre-designed applications to allow any small and medium-sized public transit agency to leverage the power of location intelligence and ultimately to become a better data-driven organization and to deliver outstanding customer service, all with the goal of increasing mobility and ridership in your communities. So it's designed to be scaled according to the size of your agency. And the small transit EA relies on your agency's total revenues to determine the price of the agreement. So your agency's total revenues are those that you report annually to the FTA as part of your annual reporting requirements. And ultimately, our goal is to eliminate the cost barrier that many times stands in the way of smaller agencies fully realizing the benefits and the value of GIS. So not only has GIS technology become so much easier to use, but we also want to bring the benefit to a larger number of agencies to help you take advantage of the power of GIS and of location intelligence. So it gives you unlimited access to a wealth of Esri's software, data, and training together, as I said, with a growing number of pre-built templates designed to get you up to speed quickly. And you'll see a number of those, a number of examples of those templates, as well as the data in a few minutes, all designed to help you easily take advantage of the technology. So it is a 3-year license. The enterprise agreement is a 3-year license, which gives you access to a wide variety of Esri software, both designed for experienced as well as novice users to deliver data and applications really to everyone in your organization. And in addition, the Esri software comes with some of the nation's richest data sets, what we call community analysts, to help you understand and plan the most effective service for your jurisdiction. You have access to and can analyze a wealth of data for your community to help you segment and better understand the diverse behavioral and locational patterns in your community. ArcGIS allows you to share data and analysis across agencies so you can better coordinate between city planning and the transit agency to help better achieve community goals. And with GIS, you can transform your organization to data-driven analysis and ultimately to make better decisions for your community. I did mention we have built a series of easy-to-implement templates, and you can see the URL listed on the page there, which are really designed to help you quickly implement targeted solutions. These include applications for safety management, which you'll hear about more in a future webinar, as well as somewhat today, to community involvement and feedback and other types of applications. We'll continue to add to this collection based on your feedback over time. And in addition, Esri has a wealth of free online tutorials to help you quickly come up to speed with the software. And finally, we have a webinar series, much like this, with technical instructions and how-to demonstrations to help agencies jumpstart their programs. And these are, again, all designed to help you easily implement these targeted solutions and quickly take advantage of the power of GIS. So ultimately, what can you do with ArcGIS? Well, it really provides an integrated software platform that brings together data, powerful analytics, and visualization capabilities to give you greater insight into your community's mobility patterns. And in addition, because it helps you bring data together from across your organization, it can help you continuously track, monitor, and improve your service. It can give you dashboards to track your agency's performance so that you can get everyone focused on the most important actions. And additionally, the software provides mobile tools to empower everyone in your organization with the applications they need to be more productive. And in fact, ArcGIS can support just about every workflow within your organization. And why don't we see a few of those examples from Justin and Jay. So Justin, I'll turn it over to you and Jay. And if you want to give some of those example applications, if you would, please.
All right. Well, thanks, Terry, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining this webinar. I know we here at Esri are really excited about this enterprise agreement, and we really feel it's kind of the optimal, the right mix of technology to be able to enable you as transit agencies to solve some of your most challenging business problems. So what Jay is going to do is he's going to give you just kind of an overview, a taste, really just scratch the surface of some of the things you can do with the technology that's included in the small transit EA. So one of those first things that you always likely will start with, right, is looking at your GTFS data, right, your route and stop data. One of the things that you'll need to do initially is to convert that GTFS. And so the EA technology that's included here will enable you to do that. And so Jay will get into that a little bit.
Cool, thanks, Justin. Yeah, let's take a look at that process now. I'm going to start off with this web page here. So like Justin said, probably one of the first things you want to do is take that GTFS data. It's kind of become our the standard way of disseminating route and stop information. So a lot of our agencies that we work with have this data. So I downloaded the zip file. This comes from Kansas City. This is KCATA data. And we can bring that into ArcGIS Pro and then convert that into GIS data that we can then use across the platform. So let's quickly take a look at how we might do that. This is a fairly straightforward demonstration here. So here I've taken that GTFS data and I've already done the conversion here. So now I'm able to see the lines and the stops here. Now, as far as doing this process, if you're not familiar with ArcGIS Pro, these tools are now part of the core product now. So there's nothing to install or any other programs you need to use in order to do this type of a conversion. So if you come up here to your analysis and add your tools here, if you go down to your conversion toolbox here, you'll see here at the very bottom there is a GTFS toolbox now. So there are a number of tools within here that you can use in order to do these conversions. So you can take your GTFS stop file and convert that to features, and the shape, which is the route itself. So just to show you how this works, I'm going to turn off these routes that we already converted. And so this is just asking for the GTFS shapes file. That's a text file. So if I navigate to the GTFS data that I downloaded, you see here, these are a list of text files. So these are the files that comprise the full GTFS. We're going to grab the shapes. And then in this case, you're just going to give it, give your feature class a name. You'll run that, and this is going to do that conversion for you. So when this is finished, you're going to be able to visualize your routes within your GIS. So you can see here, very simple to use. There's really not a whole lot to this. This will just take a second to run. And here now we have our routes that we can now visualize. Now, one of the advantages of doing this is once you've converted this, you can then share this data to the ArcGIS platform, and then it can be consumed in a number of different applications. So Justin and Terry mentioned we're going to kind of get a taste of some of these applications today. In fact, I have 19 browser tabs open today, so we have a lot of stuff to cover. So what we want to do now is take this data and publish it and make it available. So to do that, very simple. So once we've converted this, we then go to our share tab here, and I have two options. I can share the map here, the entire map, or I can just share a web layer. And while that dialog's coming up, I want to point out here that I am logged into my ArcGIS Online account. So I'm logged in with my identity. I'm going to share this now. Very simply, just give this a name, a summary, and some tags. So these would be key things that somebody might search for in order to find this data. We're going to create a feature layer, so that's going to give us feature access. I'll have access to the attributes. I could even edit the web layer and so forth. Who do I want to share it with? So this is your security here. You don't have to share it with anyone. If you don't click any of these, only you have access to the data. I can share it to my entire organization or even make it publicly available. And when I'm ready, I just publish this layer. And that's all there is to that. Just for sake of time, I've already published this, and let's take a look at that. So when you've published this now, you now have this, what we call feature layer. And this feature layer can then be visualized in a map. So this is a web map now. We've web enabled that data now, and we can share this. We can make this publicly available, make it available for internal use, but I have my routes and my stops here. This is completely interactive, so I can click on any one of these and see the attribute data. A number of different things I can do here as far as simply changing the symbology of this layer or changing the pop-ups. So if I don't want to see everything in the pop-up here, I can turn off given attributes that I may not want to see or may not want to have people edit. And when I'm finished with this, I can then save my web map. Again, this is going to ask for some tags. I can save my map, and then I can share my map. And again, I have the same options for sharing this. But the best way to consume a map is in some type of an application. So there are a number of pre-configured applications here. So depending on what you're trying to do, you might want to take a look at some of these. So if I want to tell a story, I could use a story map. If I want somebody to edit this data, I might use one of these editing applications and so forth. Let's just use our basic viewer here. We'll create this web app. And when this finishes, we're going to have a ready-to-use web application that I could then use. I could use this internally and share this with the public. I could embed this into my agency's website. But you can see here with just a few button clicks, we were able to take some GTFS data, web enable it, and now we're going to have a web application here in a few seconds. And I apologize, I know we're all working from home now, so we're definitely taxing our home networks here between the webcast and creating some of this web. So here's my web application. This is completely configurable, so I don't need to know any type of HTML coding or anything like that. But I have a number of different options here as far as configuring this. But when I'm finished with it, once I configure it the way I want, I can then launch this, And now this is ready to go. I now have a functioning web application that could then be used across my agency or even with the public. All right. That's kind of a quick overview of GTFS conversion.
Yeah, and even though, you know, Jay is a very smart and talented individual, he made that look really easy. The reality is it is, you know, just with a few clicks there, Jay was able to take some GTFS data, author something in ArcGIS Pro, share that out. So he's showing some of the power with the ArcGIS platform and with the sharing and collaboration capabilities so that anyone in an agency can have access to that and be able to share that information. So really important to look at that. So another really powerful and rich tool that we want to demonstrate and is included in the enterprise agreement is ArcGIS Insights. So once you have converted that GTFS data, now you can bring it into this tool and do some further analysis, maybe something specifically around Title VI, and Jay's going to show that for you.
Thank you, Justin. I appreciate you saying I'm smart and everyone's muted, so I couldn't hear anyone laughing.
That's right.
Okay, so let's take a look at Insights. So this is an example of Insights, and this is just mocked up data that I created here. But what we're looking at here is these stops, and we happen to be looking at the Boston metropolitan area. And a lot of our agencies are collecting AVL data. So you have an AVL system on your vehicles, and you might be tracking your on-time performance. So what we've done is we've kind of aggregated on-time performance down to the bus stop level and are looking at, you know, stop by stop, how well are we performing? And just on average, our vehicles on time at a given stop. So these are just different ways of visualizing data. We were calling these cards here, but these are interactive. So if I'm interested in stops that are not on time, just by clicking no here, I'm showing the stops that on average we're not performing well at, but my map updates and all of my other KPI cards that I'm looking at here are updating as well. So I can see, you know, the adherence by stop here. I can see that, you know, these are stops that were on average 5 minutes or more late. If I unclick that now, all of my cards are going to update. But this is just a nice way of visualizing your data. You can even aggregate this data by different geographies or different visualizations. So here, if I'm looking at my on-time performance by town, so how am I performing by town? And again, I can interact with this, click on this, and this is going to update each one of my cards. So I see that visualization. Looking at the relationship between two different variables. So you know, if I'm interested in, again, we're looking at town and on-time performance. If I click Newton, I can see what proportion of those stops are on time in this particular location. What we might want to do though now is maybe take a look at some comparisons over time. So how are we doing year over year? So again, this is mocked up data, but how are we performing on boardings in 2019 versus 2020? So we can see here 19 and 20, our boardings are up slightly, but we can visualize our change in boardings here. And here on the x-axis, we have our 2019, on the y 2020 boarding. So I can look at the relationship, but then I could start to look for outliers. So, you know, where are locations where we saw a big jump in boardings, or where are locations where we lost a number of boardings? To start to do that type of analysis and try to figure out, well, why am I losing boardings in a given location? Are these clustered near one another? We can do that type of analysis. And here we're just taking that even further. So now we're just looking at those stops that have less boardings, but I can do spatial analysis right within this, and I'm right within Insights. And again, I'm just in a web browser here, but I can come in here and I can do things like create a service area around each one of my stops. I can do a fixed distance, or maybe I'm interested in, let's say, a 15-minute walk time around each one of my stops. And once I do that, I can bring in different types of demographic data that I might want to look at. So is the population increasing or decreasing around my stops? And that's what we're looking at here. And of course, this looks very linear and neat, mostly because this is mocked up data. But I could pull all that together, and here I can see what's the relationship between change in population and their change in boardings? So is there some type of a correlation between population growth or decline and the number of boardings that I'm having? So just kind of one quick example of how you could use insights to really interrogate your data. Let's take a look at another example here. So again, this is something that most agencies have to do is a Title VI analysis, and part of that analysis is determining whether or not a route is a minority serving route. So I think traditionally the way that's going to be done is you're going to pull in your linear route feature. You're going to do some type of a buffer, a 3/4 mile buffer around that route, or maybe a 1/2 mile, whatever your particular metric is. You're going to select the census tracts that intersect that route, and then you're going to determine how many of those census tracts have a higher proportion of minority population than the given service area. And that's fine, and that meets the FTA standard for doing that. But we think we can use insights to help streamline that process, but also give a truer picture of what your access is and how well you're serving your population. So we've pulled in that GTFS data from Kansas City. I have all of my stops here, but instead of looking at the route itself, I want to look at the stops, because that's where I have access to the system. It's not the line. I can only get on at a bus stop. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. What did that move over there? Apologize. Let's come back out here. So if I zoom in on some of these stops, what we can do now is that same type of analysis where I'm doing that 15-minute walk time. So now I can start to see what the actual access around each one of these stops looks like. I can also pull in demographic data here as well. So for my service area, I know my total population. I can also calculate the minority population, and now I know the percent of the population of my service area that's minority. So now any stop that serves more than 31% of a minority population, we're going to call that a minority stop. And what I can do now is aggregate those stops to the route level and determine how many stops on a given route are minority stops. And that's what we've done here. So for Route 1, 64 of those stops, and you can see it here on the map, it's highlighting those stops. 64 of those stops were minority stops, 20 were not. So we're going to say this is a non-minority serving route. But some of these other stops serve a higher proportion of minority stops than non-minority stops. So we're going to call those minority stops. So in this case, Route 9, we're calling this a minority serving route. I can see it here, but a higher number of these stops are serving minority neighborhoods. So again, this is just another way of doing this type of analysis, but I think it's giving you a better picture of true service. Now, one great advantage to using insights for this type of analysis is that everything I've done here is stored in this model. So you can see I did a lot of different things here. I pulled in county level population data. I brought in my GTFS data here, did some filtering. I enriched my data, did some data aggregation. This is all being stored here in this model. And when it comes time to rerun this analysis, so I made a major service change or it's my 3-year time, I can simply come in here and just update my data and rerun this model, and I don't have to think about all the processes that I did in the past. It's just going to spit out that result for me. Okay, so with that, let's go back to Justin.
Nice. And yeah, real quick on what Jay just showed in Insights, I think a really powerful thing that he showed was that model at the end, right? So quite a bit of work is done to, like he showed, to bring in that data, to filter it, to enrich it, then you aggregate it, then you do some calculations. So to not have to go back and build all that over again from scratch, to be able to reuse that model is a really important and powerful tool that you'll find pretty useful as you use it in Insights. So the next thing, right? So as a transit agency, you likely have folks in the field, right? Whether that be staff doing things in the field, or even your riders are doing things in the field, right? They're the ones that are out there riding transit and might have feedback and things that they want to provide to a transit agency. So field operations is a big part of the operations in the transit agency, and Jay's going to give you an overview of some of what that looks like.
Great, thank you for the introduction there. Yeah, so let's take a step back and let's look at, we published that GTFS data as a feature layer, and I said we can consume that now across a number of applications. So we saw how I just used that same data within the Insights application. Well, I want to show you now how you could use this in a mobile application. So maybe you need to go out in the field and update some attributes about your stops, or maybe you've added some new stops and you're not, you don't have that in your system, but you need to go out and collect that information. Well, we can use this same layer now because this is going to become kind of our system of record for stops now. So I can come in here, and there's a few things that I just want to point out here that you need to set up before you send people out in the field with this data. The first thing I like to do is click this Enable Attachments button here. That's going to allow people out in the field to snap a photo or a video of a feature when they're out using the application. We come here to the Settings tab here for this layer. You need to make sure that editing is enabled. So if this is unchecked, make sure you check editing. And there's also some other optional things you can put in here as well. So you can track who's updating and creating features, which is really nice for kind of QA, QC. You know who's making these changes. And you can also have some control over what can be done. So if you don't want people to delete stops, for example, you can uncheck this, and this is going to only allow folks to add or update existing features, which is really nice. So you have a lot of control over your data here. Something else you can do here within ArcGIS Online is, so when we publish this, we're just getting the GTFS table here, which isn't too useful. You can come into this Fields tab, though, and add new fields. So if I want to add a field about maybe whether there's a garbage can at the stop. So let's put in a field for garbage. And we're just going to make this a yes, no. I can add that new field. So now I have this field for garbage. I also added one for bench before we started the demonstration. So I can come into this garbage field now, and what I can do here is create a list. And this is just going to be a yes, no. So this is kind of, think of this as a domain list if you're used to using ArcGIS. Yes, no. And I can save this list now. So now I've updated this layer. And the only thing you need to do now is to create a web map and make this web map accessible to whoever out in the field needs access to it. So to do that, all you need to do is a save as, give it a name, and then share it. I've already done that. So let's take a look at how this might look on a mobile device. Let me pull up my device here. Okay, so I am in the collector application here. And I'm going to do a search for KCATA. So this is the map that I created previously. So I'm using that same data feed here. And let's go to the Kansas City area. So now I can see all of these stops here. I can interact with this. And what I can do now is I can edit any one of these. So I can come in here and edit. And let's say for our bench here, I'm getting that yes, no list. I'm going to say, yes, there is a bench. And now that updates my database now. I also have the option of adding a new feature. So this is going to go to my given location that I'm at. You can see here I can take a photo, enter all of this attribute information, and collect this point. So this is one example of how you can use this collector application to keep your data up to date in a field operation. I'm going to show you another example of some field work here. Let's get out of this. And this is going to be an example of going out in the field and doing an ADA assessment. Let me update my map here. So what we're looking at here is workforce, and this is an application that you get, and this allows you to manage field operations. So here I can see the status of my field workers. So I can see that Jay is logged in here, he's working, I can get his location, I can see the status of assignments that have been created. But what we're looking at here is these are all of the bus stops in our system, and we need to go out and assess every single one of these. So what I can do now is I can create some work orders here. So I can select some of my stops. I can see the 2 stops that I selected here, verify that I have the right stops. I'm going to create an assignment for each one of these. And this is a configurable application, so you decide what these assignments are. I'm going to send somebody to do an inspection here. These are the 2 stops. Who do I want to assign it to? Give it a priority and a due date and a time that you need this done by. You can also provide some type of a work order ID if you have another system you want to tie this into, give a description. We're going to create an assignment now, or create 2 assignments in this particular instance. So I can see here I have 2 assignments that have been created for Jay. Now the field worker, let me bring my phone back up here. Bear with me 1 second. So here on my mobile device now, I'm just opening Workforce. I can see here that I have two assignments that have been created for me. So I can take a look at what these assignments are. I can see where they're located. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to accept this assignment. So I'm going to hit Start. I'm going to, I can get turn-by-turn navigation to this assignment if I need to, but let's say I'm at the assignment, I'm ready to do my survey. This is going to launch another mobile application called Survey 123. And this is a smart form. These are configurable forms that you can see here. We've logged the location, we've pulled in the bus stop ID. And then this asks me questions about the ADA status of the stop. So I just need to fill out some information here, but you can see you can include photos. These are smart forms. So if I say no, all these questions about the pad go away. If I say yes, I get questions about the pad. So we'll just mock up some data here. So these are all things that you would have to assess in order to determine whether or not the stop is ADA compliant. So these are all slope measurements that you would take. And when I'm finished here, because this is a smart form, this even makes a determination of whether or not this stop is ADA compliant or not. And this one says it's not, and it's because it's missing a sign. Now, if I were to change this and say, yes, there is a sign, this is going to update now. It says meets the ADA requirements. I can also add other information about amenities, include images as well. But when I'm finished, I simply send this in now. This is going to update my ADA database. And then I can simply just go back to Workforce, finish my assignment, and now my list updates to show my other inspection that I need to do. Now on the back end, all this information has been collected, and we're showing this in a dashboard here. So this is an operations dashboard, but this is showing the status of all the stops. This is updating in real time. So here's the stop that I just collected. I can see that information. I'm getting a status update on the what % of my stops are compliant, how many we've surveyed. I can see all of the information at a given stop. And then for those stops that have been that are not compliant, what are the issues? And then what's a rough cost estimate of what it's going to be to update these? So that's just a couple of examples there of how you might use some of these mobile applications.
That was awesome, Jay. So for those of you on the webinar, something that Jay just demonstrated pretty seamlessly is how, if you envision your agency, different roles in the agency, right? So someone in the office sending field crews out, and then you're the person in the field, and then you're back in the office and you're looking at things on dashboards and whatnot. So, really the field workflow has something kind of for everyone in those different roles, and it's pretty awesome. So the next thing we want to do is show you community analysts. We're going to spend some time here because this is a really powerful and important tool to provide to transit agencies. So really it's, looking at, kind of demographic data mashed up with your transit data to make better decisions about maybe current and future routes. And there's a whole slew of other things you can do, and Jay's gonna demonstrate that for you now.
Cool, thank you. Okay, so I have a couple of examples here that I want to show for community analysts online, and we feel this is maybe one of the most, if not the most valuable tool that you get in this EA package. I used to work as a GIS analyst in a planning department for a transit agency, and I was just thinking if I had this tool, it would have really saved me a lot of time and made my job much easier, because this has given me it's a huge, rich set of data right here at my fingertips, whether it's demographic data or market analysis data, but then also some really simple and easy to use tools, but really powerful tools as well. So I'm logged in here. Again, I'm doing all of this in a browser. So kind of the example I want to give here, and I'm just going to go through this quickly. We're kind of running a little bit behind time here. But one thing that you often have to do when you're creating new routes is you want to do a demographic comparison of an existing route versus a proposed route. You might have to do that for Title VI, or you may just do it for your own agency's due diligence. So here we're looking at two different routes, and if you can't see it here, the blue route is our new proposed route. It's actually much shorter than our existing route, which is in red. But what I might want to do is do some type of a comparison between these two. So, we talked about using a walk time to do that type of, to get a true look at your access. But I just want to show you can also use traditional buffers, and that's what I've done here. I just did a regular 3/4 mile buffer around these. So, if this is your standard, if this is how you want to do things, you can continue to use regular buffers, and I just want to show that that's what we're going to do here. So I've created a buffer around each one of these routes. So what I want to do now is do a comparison of the service area for each one of these routes. So what I need to do now is I can select each one of these. And what I want to do is create sites for these. So sites are what you're going to use to do reporting. So I'm going to create 2 different sites here. I can create a new layer here. So it's going to take these 2 buffer polygons and turn them into sites. And these are just really the things that, so I have my 2 sites here. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to rename these so it's a little bit easier. I'm going to rename this the existing route. And we'll rename this to be our proposed. And there's a lot of things I can do with these now. For one thing, I can just open this infographics tab, and this is going to give me a really nice infographic for whichever site I have selected. So here we're looking at key facts. So right away I can see the median age, median household income, language, but there's a number of different configured infographics here. So if I'm looking at an employment overview, I can pull up that infographic. And you can see right away, it very quickly puts out this very, very attractive looking infographic that I can then use, and I can share this or embed this into another application. What I want to do though is do a comparison report. I want to compare these 2 sites to one another. So I'm going to come to my reports tab here, and you can see here I've actually already ran this report, but let's just create a new report. And this is our data browser. So we have hundreds of different data layers available within here. And I've selected a number of these to get started with, but just to show you, you can browse by topic, or you could do a search here. So if I'm interested in minority population, for example, number of different sources here. I can pull from the 2010 US Census, but I also want to show here, we have a dedicated demographics team in Redlands that takes and curates this data and does our own projections and modeling. So we have 2019 data here, and I can look at the 2019 minority population. So I'm getting the most up-to-date data as possible. And they're pulling this from ACS and doing some of their own projections as well. I could look at the raw number, or I could look at a percentage, but all I do is simply add this to my list here and apply this. And now I'm doing a comparison here of, let me change my sites here. And you can even pull in neighboring geographies, because this is important. You want to compare this to your to your existing system or your service area. So I'm pulling in St. Louis County, St. Louis City. But we can see here that for my new and my existing routes, I can compare the two, and I can also compare these numbers to my service area. So that's one example of how you could take these routes and do some comparison. Let's take a look at another example here. And what I've done here is this is a what we call a smart map search. So kind of the use case here is maybe you want to do some type of community outreach and you're not exactly sure where to do that outreach, or you're thinking about where to site a new transit center or some type of a site selection. Well, whenever we're doing something like that, we want to narrow down our locations and think about a good spot to do this. So in this particular example, I want to do outreach, but I want to do outreach targeted at my Hispanic population in my community. So with the smart map search, I can add up to 5 different variables. I've brought in 3: Hispanic population, median household income, and workers who use public transportation. Now I can use these sliders here to narrow down the locations that meet whatever criteria I'm looking for. So by block group now, if I want to look at a higher proportion of population that's using transit, I just use these sliders, and this is narrowing down those locations. Same for income. If I want to look at lower income, I simply slide this down. So this is really giving me allowing me to focus where my outreach should be. So now I'm seeing areas within, in this case, the Charlotte area that meet my criteria. What I want to do now is think about locations where I might host a community event. So for that, I'm going to come here to my Create Maps tab. I'm going to do a facility search. And I know when I worked in public transit, when we would do a lot of these outreach things, we would often look for public schools. Those were good places to have an event. So I could search for school here. And this is pulling up all of these schools within this given area. So I can zoom in here. This looks like a good target area. A lot of our block groups here are meeting this criteria. And I could select any one of these schools that have popped up here. So this is Eastway Middle School. So again, I want to create a site here. So I'm going to do a buffer. And again, you can do a Euclidean buffer if you want, or I want to do a walk time. And I'm just going to say people might be willing to walk up to 30 minutes to get here. And right away, I can see what that 30-minute walk time looks like. So again, I can pull up an infographic for that given walk area. And here I'm looking at the at-risk population here, so I can see the average household size, median household income, language spoken at home. So here I can see there's a pretty large population that speaks Spanish and not English. So, you know, I'm hitting my target population. That was the population I'm looking for, so that's good verification. But I can also run some other pre-configured reports for this. So there's an entire list here of reports that you can use. I want to use what's called a tapestry segmentation profile. So that demographics team I mentioned, they've segmented the entire United States into, I believe it's 68, give or take, neighborhood profile types. And let's take a look at this. This is going to show the predominant neighborhood type for that 30-minute walk time. So these are the neighborhood segments for this. Looks like the top one here is what we're calling Metro Fusion. So let's take a look at this. Zoom in a little bit. So this is the Metro Fusion profile report. Who are we? So it's a young, diverse market. They do not speak English. So again, kind of confirming that I'm hitting the mark. Diverse, 31% Black, 34% Hispanic. So again, you know, this is my target market. Here's some nice infographics about this neighborhood type. But in this case, you know, if I want to do outreach, this market profile is really useful. So if I was going to put up flyers to notify people that we're doing some type of an outreach, I might put them up at a grocery store, Family Dollar, or Walmart. Those are the types of stores that these folks are using. Or if I had money to do like a radio ad, let's say, these are the types of radio stations I'd probably want to target. So again, all of this available at your fingertips, just with a few button clicks. Very, very easy to use.
Nice. Yeah, and that all runs in a browser. Super advanced analysis and really rich data that's included with Community Analyst. Okay, last thing, and we won't spend too much time on here because there will be a separate webinar next week to go more in depth on SMS for transit agencies, but we did want to highlight it.
Oh, okay, sorry. I was just pushing ahead here because I know we're running a little bit behind.
One thing I just wanted to say is most agencies knows that the deadline for having your SMS in place has been extended to December 31st. I just did want to say that in case you didn't know. So move the deadline from July 20th to December 31st. Go for it, Jay.
Cool, thanks, Justin. Yeah, so thinking about safety management, there are a number of applications you can configure that are going to meet the FTA requirement for an SMS. I just want to show a few of these here. Like Justin said, we have another webinar just like this on Tuesday next week, in which we'll go more in depth on this. But just to kind of show you, this is a configuration of ArcGIS Hub, which you get with ArcGIS Online in your subscription. So in this particular use case, we're going to think about using Hub internally. So this could be a landing page for your employees to come in. They can see how hazards are being reported. They can see the components of workplace safety. You can link out to your agency's safety plan here so that anyone has access to that. You can provide reporting tools as well. So if you want an employee to be able to report a hazard, they can simply come in here. This is going to launch. In this case, we're using that same Survey 123 application that we used for ADA compliance. Here I can use it in a browser. You could even have QR codes posted throughout your bus garage, for example, and they scan it with their phone, launches the same application. But the idea here is that anyone can report some type of a hazard that they encounter, give a description, photos, and submit that. And we can track all of these in a safety management application like this. So as these hazards are being reported, a safety manager can see what is the status of these hazards, where are they located, how serious are they, assign folks to go out in the field and either mitigate that hazard or inspect it or whatever it might be that you are going to do with this hazard. But we can send somebody out in the field to do that type of inspection. This creates that work order that they have. But then ultimately, you know, a big component of this is tracking the status of all of this. So we have our hazards here, our events. So events would be incidents or accidents or occurrences, things that actually happen. So tracking our progress, you know, our number of events are down here. This is good. We can even go more in depth here. So looking at those events, what's the status of these? So we can see here we're closing these out in a timely fashion. What time of day are these happening? So we look at trends, day of the week, and then even individual accidents here. So I always have access to the accident report here. I can see what the status is, the notes that were taken, and I can even link out to the actual report here. And that's another big component of this application, is that it actually creates the report that you could submit to FTA or to, you know, if you submit to the state or some other local governing body. This report is automatically generated from all of the stuff that you're collecting throughout this process. And just to kind of put a bow on this, I wanted to show the solution site, and Terry mentioned this. This is solutions.arcgis.com. This is where we have a lot of those configurable solutions, and you can come in here and download these. So right now, coronavirus is very big, obviously. There's a number of applications here for business continuity and recovery, response. If you come down here to local government, this is where you're going to find the transit applications. So a lot of these safety applications are available right here. You can download and configure these. There's an adopt a transit stop application and some things for doing transit outreach as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Terry to wrap up.
All right, thanks, Jay and Justin. So I hope that you all have seen really just the amazing amount of data and the things that you're actually able to do with ArcGIS. You know, these are really just a few of the examples of how you can use the technology to improve your service, your operations, and ultimately how you can really better serve your communities. as I said before, it can enrich just about every workflow across your entire agency. So everything from performance monitoring, you saw safety and security, planning, and real-time operations. So, what it's really designed to do is to enrich just about every workflow in your organization. So with that, we'd like to turn it over for questions. We're going to show you actually how you can take advantage, and you would go to this website and you can learn more details about how you can take advantage of the program. So with that, let me open it up for questions. Again, just type your questions into the question box, and we'll start answering them. So, and again, one of the questions was how to take advantage. If you go to this website here, you can take a screen capture, or we will make these available, and this will explain the details and then send you to allow you to reach out, and someone will contact you. There's another question. Is there another way to access this webinar? Yes, within about 3 to 4 days, we will have it posted up on the website. And again, that's Esri.com transportation. And if you navigate to the transportation webinars, it'll actually be posted there. So if you were not able to see the whole thing, or if you'd like a colleague to see the webinar, they'll be able to do it in roughly 3 to 4 days. There's another question maybe for you, Jay. Are the infographics that you were showing, are those customizable? Can I change the components that I want displayed on those, or how does that work?
Great question. The answer is yes. So I think you saw the list there. There were a few pre-configured infographics, but you can build out your own infographics, and they can have photos that you've taken. They can pull from any one of those demographic data sources. So if you want something that shows race and income and education, you can select what those variables are and build your own infographic with its own look and feel.
All right, and let's see, there's another, can you really maybe go into a little bit more detail about the type of data that is contained in the community analyst data set?
Yeah, so it's a really rich data set. So it includes a lot of data from the US Census and ACS, which of course is updated. It has projections that have been created by our demographics team. There is a lot of business and market data in there as well, and that comes from Infogroup. And that includes number of employees, that it has different types of market data. So how much money are people spending on transportation, or it even gets down to how much money do people spend on dog food in a given location. It's just a really rich set of data there, and it is all documented on the Esri website about the data sources and what's in there. But it'd be a lot to explain. There's a lot of data in there. That's all I could say.
Okay, thanks. So there's another question. A lot of what you were showing involves ArcGIS Online, and obviously that's a sort of a very easy to use, easy to access. There was a question about sort of credits, looking at being able to do route planning, publishing on the web. Can you talk about sort of the credits associated with the EA then, and how that works as well?
Yeah, so I don't have and maybe Justin could speak to this, I don't know the amount of credits that are given with the EA, but as far as credit consumption goes, when you're doing some of the analysis, if you're using the online tools, that is going to consume some of those credits. All of that is documented on the ArcGIS website about how many credits are being used. In fact, when you're doing things in the web map, there's even a credit estimator there, so you know when you're doing that walk time analysis, for example, that uses a fraction of a credit for each one of those points. Justin, do you have some details on?
I do, yeah. No, it's fine. Yeah, so on the EA landing page, it lists how many ArcGIS Online Service credits are associated with each level. So level 1 comes with 2,500, level 2, 10,000, and level 3, 17,500. So it scales up with each level.
That's great. That's a great number of credits there. Most of these processes that I showed use fractions of credits, so generally it's not too much of a worry. And then of course you are getting ArcGIS Pro with all of the extensions, so if there's some of these things you can even run locally and not be consuming any credits. So you have that flexibility there.
All right. And again, if you'd like to learn more and whether your agency qualifies and the different breakpoints between the different levels and the prices, please go to this website and you can learn more. In addition, at the end of when we close this in just a second, there you will be a questionnaire, and if you'd like to be contacted, please indicate so, and somebody will get in touch with you right away. With that, we'd like to thank you all for being on. Again, this webinar will be available to everyone in roughly about 3 or 4 days, and we'd like to thank you for joining, and hope that you will join next week when we go into detail about the safety management system for transit. So with that, we'd like to close it off. And again, thanks so much for attending today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.